Joining me now is New York Democratic Congressman George Latimer. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I got to ask you really quick about your reaction to Pete Hegseth there going over what he claims are no war plans in that group chat. And, you know, he's been pretty adamant about it, while other people are saying there was a little too much information in that. Just want to get your take on that real quick.
Well, I don't think it's up to the subject to determine whether the actions were appropriate or not. You have legislative oversight for a reason, and it's been used in the past when the Republicans thought that a member of a Democratic administration had done something that they didn't like. So the same rules should apply here. The House and the Senate should have a joint investigation, have a hearing, bring Secretary Hegseth and Mr. Waltz and the others to the table and be queried about the decisions they made, not just speak to a reporter, which is fine for public information, but to let people who have a background in the House and in the Senate in national security issues ask more penetrating questions. Now, I haven't called for anybody to resign right off the bat, but I do think if you stonewall having a hearing, if you deny the opportunity to come clean, then you must be hiding something. There'd be no reason for you, if you're comfortable with your actions, to be transparent about it. I think one of the problems you have in government, this administration, but in other places as well, is the unwillingness to ever admit fault. And sometimes there's fault. And sometimes you have to be able to say, we understand, we made a mistake, we're going to fix it, and here's how we're going to fix it. And that would be helpful as well as out of a hearing process.
We've been talking a lot about how Democrats are working together. Can they come together and work in a unified manner when it comes to this inquiry?
Well, I would hope so. The bottom line is that there is a common interest in knowing the details of what happened, and not, again, just what someone asserts happened. Every traffic stop where the police officer stops an individual, the individual has a reason for why it wasn't an illegality. The police officer has to determine whether or not they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this is too important. When you have something of this nature, I don't know what's purely classified or what isn't. But what I do know is that 2 hours before the United States take military action, that someone was on the line hearing it who was not authorized to do so. It turned out to be a reporter. It could have been an agent for another country, and they might have been able to take action to prevent the effort. And as I think as some of my colleagues have said, with a 2-hour advance notice, you might have launched a strike on those American forces that were prepared to launch the strike. So any number of bad things could have happened. We ought to know why, and we ought to be able to understand that in a public domain.
Yeah, there's certain. Go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people say that there's more to go. I mean, as the White House has said, nothing, not necessarily nothing to see here, but they want it to go away. And many people still have a lot of questions about this, and they need more transparency on it. So we are going to keep the pressure on to get to that. I also want to ask you, sir, while I have you, about the Tesla takedown that's happening all over the country and now the entire world. So when Democrats take a look at this, how do they ride this wave of anger against Elon Musk? How do you see people coming together or, staying focused on the message of trying to get some answers as to how this is playing out?
Well, we're looking at something, that's unprecedented. A person who is the wealthiest man in the world, who has been given an open portfolio by the President of the United States to fire people. And he sent out emails just firing people. Now, in court, the judges have halted some of those actions and have reversed some of those actions because they weren't legal, or they haven't been defended as legal. But who is Elon Musk, his success notwithstanding in the business world, to be able to assert that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme? He asserts that there's fraud, waste, and corruption and things that he doesn't know the details about. So there's a reason for these protests and these angers. Now, let me be clear. There should not be violence at any protest, and there should not be any damage of property. We have a right to protest. We have a right to assemble, but we have to do that peaceably. And so I don't support people who set cars on fire and deface property. But I do support them making their voices heard clearly and assembling in the proper way with signage and to show that Elon Musk is accountable like everybody else is accountable. He is not in a special zone of unaccountability because he is wealthy. And I think that's really what is undermining the credibility of all these actions, is that you have a renegade individual who answers to nobody other than the president, and the president doesn't seem to rein him in. And I secretly suspect, I don't know this, but I suspect most of the cabinet members resent the fact that they've taken on the responsibility to run a department, and then Elon Musk comes in from outside of that with his band of merry men, young people who haven't built anything, and they're prepared to tear down something that they don't even know where people with some substance, the Marco Rubios of the world, who've had government experience, are trying to
Yeah, I was just
master
going to ask
the
you
Department of
about
State.
Rubio. I was just going to ask you about Rubio because we've been hearing about this reported friction between them, and then we've heard that there was no friction between Musk and Rubio. But to be a fly on the wall, right? We want to hear what's going on in those closed-door meetings, and we've got much more to go on that. New York Democratic Congressman George Latimer, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.